All right, everybody, welcome again to another OKD Working Group. I'm going to drive this via the community page, so if you've got other additions to add to this agenda, please let me know. As well, in the chat, you'll see a link to this wonderful document, which you are all wonderfully filling out, if you can add the attendee stuff. I'm going to quickly just give an update on upcoming events and ask people to let me know if they're coming to KubeCon. If you could do that, maybe in this section here on the meetings page. If you're going to be there, let me know. Because I'm trying to, I'll probably set up a doodle because we have a room set aside for us at KubeCon. It's at the Gaslight Marriott across the street from the convention center. It only holds 15 people, but I thought we could at least do meet and greet there, or maybe have office hours at KubeCon. So I'd like to find out who from the working group is going to be there, so maybe we can coordinate times, as well as well, everybody's filling in their agenda items. We have a speaking slot set aside for the London OpenShift Commons gathering on January 29th, and I think Christian, you've been tapped to do part of that by Tanya Repo, who's the organizer this time for that. And so
one in London, or yeah, I think Tanya wanted me to join the one in Darmstadt.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good reminder. Darmstadt is not a gathering; it is a it's a forum, Red Hat forum. They're gonna have.
I don't know whether I'll be of those events yet. I'll ask management about the travels if that's possible.
All right. So what? Yeah. So I'm going to try and each meeting add in these things. And if people have other events, I'm really trying to figure out ways to get the messaging out about OKD and to build up this working group with some more external voices. So if you have other events that we should participate in, if you can let me know. And what I'm going to try and do is, since I kind of own the agenda for OpenShift Commons gatherings, I'm going to make sure that there's an OKD, at least a lightning talk at the gathering in KubeCon North America in San Diego. So I'll be looking to see who can, who's going to be attending. So Christian, I know we've been tapping you a lot. So if you can get yourself to KubeCon, that would be great. For those meet and greets, Clayton, I know you said you were going to be there. And yes, definitely DevConf. CZ, we should have a presence at. I'm planning on attending that because one of my favorite things to do. So if there are other events, please just add them in there. And what I'll do is, I think I'm going to use the projects page here to kind of list out all the upcoming events and see who is available to speak to these topics. So you can let me know and let us know if you're available and have permission and funding to travel. That would be great. And Danny, I know you're busy because you've just joined a new company, but things are a little crazy right now for you. But that's really what I'm looking for, is to get a little OKD, even if it's just a 5-minute lightning talk at each of these events. Probably at DevConf we can get a whole speaking slot to figure out what the CFP is for. I know, Christian, I'm pretty sure you got that submission in for Red Hat Summit in April as well. So we'll see if that gets accepted, and if not, we'll definitely have something on the menu at the gathering there. So
I'll definitely be DevConf in Brno, and I'll ask whether I can be at whether I can come to KubeCon.
Okay.
I'll be in the US before anyway, so that might be possible.
Yeah. So, and the other thing is if there's meetups in your area or something like that, what I'd like to do, I know I'm on the hook for a one-page slide to update, at least internally to Red Hat, but should be able to use externally as well on the roadmap for OKD. Get that done. I'll circulate that to this group as well, so you can give me feedback on it. Make sure I got it correct and didn't overpromise anything. But what I'd like to do is at least have like a standing deck that we can use that has the roadmap and how to get involved, that anyone who's doing a meetup can just use that deck and get that up into the GitHub repo, so that there's a standing capability, and just really try and get the word out a little bit more what we're doing here, and the timelines in the roadmap, so we can get some good external feedback on it as well. So that's what I had in terms of upcoming events. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to let Christian give us now the OKD update. We have a little chart in here, and I know we have Steve Hardy on deck to do a little talk on MetalCube. I'm wondering if anyone from the packet, or if anyone can speak to the packet stuff. Is Dusty on the call today? Yeah. You're willing to?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I know Neil reached out to Tomasz about that particular topic. I don't think Tomasz was able to join us today, though.
Okay,
yeah,
so we'll
he
just.
wasn't. He can. So hopefully we can get him some maybe the next tweet meeting, but he wasn't able to make it for this one.
Okay, and I'm wondering if anybody's here to talk about Code Ready.
Hey, Charo's here. You had me down to talk about it. I can tell you guys what I've been experimenting with and what I know at this point. It's probably not more than 2 or 3 minutes.
That's fine. We just need to have a connection with the group and make sure we're in sync and know what you guys are doing. So that'll be perfect. So so Christian, why don't you take it away and give us a bit of an update on what OKD is doing, and if anyone else has other agenda items, just please add them in, and we'll just rock and roll here.
All right, so I just pasted a link to our project Kanban board for OKD4 on the OpenShift organization. And essentially we have lots of wheels turning at the moment, really making progress. So Clayton, Vadim, and I have been, especially Clayton and Vadim, have done lots of work to getting the OKD CI set up on Prow. So we're working on that right now, and very soon I think we'll have a continuously built machine OS content, and derived from that a continuously built release payload that we can actually use to stand up clusters on FCOS. I know Vadim's made great progress and already has been successfully able to spin up a cluster on FCOS, which is awesome. So yeah, Vadim, that's your pictures. Great work. Thanks again for that. If you look in the chat. So really, we're getting closer to actually getting an alpha release out. Right now we're building all the RP, like we have FCOS branches in the MCO, in the machine config operator, and in the installer repos, from which we're going to be building our components with Ignition Spec 3 support for the time being. Merge that back into master. There's really been lots of progress. One thing we're doing right now is we're just taking the RPMs that are built in a CentOS 7 container and overlaying the binaries on top of FCOS or Fedora machine OS content RPM. Over time, we'll be building that out to actually build the stuff in a Fedora build root. For now, for the alpha release, we'll just be taking the CentOS build binaries. And yeah, we'll be overlaying just the binaries, not the RPMs yet, because we a VM to overlay RPMs. But yeah, for a stopgap solution, that's going to be really great. And yeah, that really lets us move forward. So I hope by the next meeting we actually have something everybody can download.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be, yeah, definitely.
So is that something people can play with like in 2 weeks' time? Is that what you're thinking by the next meeting?
By the next meeting, I hope we can get most of the CI stuff set up this week. I'm not sure if there's lots of work going on with our 4.3 release as well. So yeah, it's coming very soon. I can't really say what day, but it'll be very soon. I hope by next week we will have something. So by next meeting, I'm pretty sure that we'll really have something for everybody to test. Yeah, it'll be an alpha version, so don't expect any stability there, but at least it'll be a thing we can all tinker with.
So we'll be tracking with the latest Origin 4x code, like the 4.3 release you guys are working on for OCP, right?
Yeah, it would be all the master branches, and then there'd be the 3 repos or 2 repos that will have FCOS branches, which those FCOS branches would just stitch in, and then probably the next question after that is how quickly because like the ignition v3 stuff getting in is like has to be done across the multiple repos. So as Christian just pasted, yeah, it's basically master plus spec 3, but it'll trail a little bit, so there might be some rough patches when some of the final 4.3 like refactors for like private branches and stuff, or private clusters and stuff go in. It'll just overlap with that.
Okay, makes some sense.
Yeah,
we'll try to rebase the FCOS branches onto master regularly, so we don't lag behind too much.
Hey, Christian, something that I've been curious about at watching the journey from the 3.x family to the 4.x family is within the Origin repo that's in GitHub right now, there were pretty clear instructions in the hack.md and the contributing dot. It was not a markdown; it was a ASCII doc about building each of the components from which you would then assemble an OpenShift cluster. That's obviously changed with the 4.x family because those build instructions no longer work. One of the things I'd be really curious about that might actually enable some of us outside of the direct Red Hat community to assist in minor ways would be a refresh of those build instructions, how the new process works to build the new containers, the new RPMs, the components that then go to make up an OpenShifting cluster that the installer itself is now pulling, rather than the old style of the Ansible playbooks.
Yeah, I can't really say too much about the 3.x work because I only joined Red Hat when we were already working on 4.0. So yeah, I think definitely if that's not up to date, I'll have a look at updating that as soon as possible.
Yeah, that would be fantastic because that's the way that I've been working with the OKD releases and the 3.x family, and I would love to be able to get back into that so that even if it's just helping to test some of the build processes and things, I probably won't be contributing, but I might even start doing some of that.
Yeah, and I think that's an area too where it can help to have other folks give feedback as well. Like right now, most of the image builds are done by there's a component within the CI infrastructure that layers and builds the images. It is also possible to build those using straight up Docker builds, but it's a lot of wiring stuff together. So it could be that we still have a gap on the tooling side to make it easy for someone to rebuild all of them themselves. It's a little bit like, if you want to build CI or tooling that rebuilds all of what's in Fedora, without using the Fedora tools, you'd be, running a bunch of scripting across a lot of sources. I think we have that gap right now where we don't quite have a tool that says rebuild all of the things from master and stitch them together, because a lot of the teams and folks who've been working on it, like there's hundreds of repos at this point, and bringing them all together requires like that top level automation.
Right.
So getting to a point where like we can describe it, articulate it, identify any tooling gaps, describe what the best process would be for someone to emulate it would be good.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
All right. So I'm looking at the chart here, and support for Ignition 3 spec and FCOS. When is Ignition 3 spec coming for OpenShift itself? Is that on the radar? Because I've been some back channel talking about that. And what release?
Clayton might be able to give a better answer to this than I. I've been trying to push that forward, that we commit to that in 4.4, but yeah, I haven't really heard anything from the architect side.
Yeah, I don't know of any reason why we wouldn't target it for 4.4, but I think some of this is probably what would happen is when 4.4 reopens, when we branch for 4.3, we would update OKD to 4.4 anyway, because that would be where those changes would go. And I think like we do need to get to the point where we have a commitment for a concrete deadline to merge those. And Christian and Vadim, that's something we should probably sync with, somebody like Colin or Steve Milner or so forth, to get like that date in stone.
Definitely, we need to get buy-in from the teams that own those repos. Because otherwise it's really hard to work besides them.
The single biggest blocker I'm aware of is the pivot during Bootkube, which would allow us to get the latest or get the correct version of the MCD on the Bootstrap machine. That's probably likely to be one of the most impactful changes that needs to be orchestrated carefully. But once that's there, I think some of the other things become easier.
What's the problem with doing that right now? If we pivot early, isn't that just fixing our problems, or could there be new problems coming from that?
I think it's just the impact. Does it confuse the installer? Does it complicate like failure modes of the installer? Like if we reboot and it doesn't come back, does the Bootstrap gather stuff work correctly? And it adds some time to Bootstrap, so that could also be potentially problematic.
I have a good question, Clayton. If, let's say, working on the assumption that maybe v3 on 4.4 would be on the table, is it also the ignition provider for Terraform also on the hook to kind of be maintained by someone, or that is going to be replaced by the Shim folks in the OpenStack team are trying to work towards?
I don't know
I
how
thought
the
the
answer to
Terraform
that.
code is going away.
Is it? All right.
There's an enhancement proposal about this.
Okay. Yes.
All right then. Have we covered up the OKD thing? And I know I've got these separated out as separate tasks here on the agenda. I think you've covered off reviewing the engineering tasks, Christian. We need to add an engineering task for tracking Ignition 3 in OpenShift itself, or are we good just the way it is?
We have cards for this internally on Jira. We could probably put that on the engineering board for OKD4 as well.
Just
as just as a note on Jira too, like they're trying to get to the point where we can have the open Jira with access. So when that happens, it'll make it easier to link between the two boards. That's just hasn't yet been completed to have the open Jira for the internal teamwork.
Oh, that's a great news. So Santa is coming early then. Nice.
Santa's coming early and he's open source. Good
That's
stuff.
kind of Santa.
So, and we did the Fedora versus CentOS conversation already. So the next thing that I have on the agenda was about resourcing OKD, and I know you mentioned getting awareness on the engineering team for the Ignition 3 stuff. Are there other liaisons that we need to set up, Christian? I think you heard back from anyone on from the group. So is there anyone I need to be chasing down here?
Well, I haven't really found any commitment from a liaison, but I know that we're rather well off on the installer and MCD and MCO sides. So yeah, in the short term, I think we'll be fine, and yeah, then in the more longer term, we'll need to see what operators and what other components need to get some more or some bigger changes into them, and then it might be helpful to have a liaison in the respective team. But I think right now, for the short term, yeah, we're well off. Yeah.
So my only concern, and I do this just out of historical reference, is when we release something that everybody can test, and we start getting a lot of feedback, hopefully, from the community, how we're going to handle that input. Should we just have people posting to the OKD Working Group Google group, or do we want to open up sort of an issues thing in GitHub for people to do it, so that we can do how do you want to handle getting feedback once you, in 2 weeks' time, put this thing out there for people to test and give you feedback on?
Yeah, good question. So the first alpha will be able to support any updates from that state. But yeah, I'll definitely want to send out a link to somewhere that people can download it from, and just start, tinkering and testing.
Okay, so what I'd like to add a link for alpha download, and maybe a blog post about it being, or somewhere on okd.io. And some sort of.
Great. We need to figure out where we put our stuff first, and then once we have sort of the content ready, I'll definitely pass on a link. And yeah, if we could publish that on okd.io, that'd be great.
Yeah, because what I'm hoping is we're going to have a deluge of people testing this, and me, got happy ears. Everybody tells me they're going to test it, but maybe they don't. But we got to get the word out. And the other thing that I was thinking was, if we do have this, we can have office hours at KubeCon. Perhaps that part of that office hours there is helping people get the download up and running, or just showing it and creating a video or something, and then having people around to get that feedback one-on-one. So if there's
it may also make sense to also, when we have an alpha ready, to also see if someone could work in the Fedora magazine people to get a post up there, so that the Fedora community is aware that we now have a direct consumer of Fedora CoreOS, because that's a whole new thing that we don't have right now. Right. And it would earmark like a degree of stability for Fedora CoreOS, in my view, because something is already consuming it and using it.
That's a great idea. That's a really great idea. Yeah, we should definitely do that.
I think that was Neil speaking. Was that Neil?
Yep. Hi.
Hi. It's hard to do both things and see Christian. And so I'll put all 3 of our names on that, and as soon as we have it, that's an excellent idea. I'll start the gobbledygook in a Google Sheet somewhere and share it with the three of you, and we can get that out there and figure out how to get that in. That would be awesome. But yeah, really, I want to take advantage of that. This is coming out around KubeCon North America, so we can, and I have it at the gathering. I really want to do a lightning talk on it at the very least, 5 minutes if Christian's there or someone's there, and give you the podium to tell people, show the one slide that I'm supposed to make, and show people that the alpha release is there, and tell them what the roadmap is in 5 minutes or less. So just keep getting the word out because I keep getting asked the question. So that sounds like we're almost to the point, unless there's someone else has snuck another topic in that we should ask Steve Hardy to maybe take over the screen for a Metal Cube update.
Yeah, sure. Just 1 second. Let me share my screen.
Stop sharing.
Okay. Hopefully you can see those slides okay?
Yep. Not quite in full. There you go.
Yep, there we go. So yeah, hopefully that's a bit better. So yeah, I saw the agenda invite for the previous meeting, so sorry, didn't actually make it to that call. But yeah, so Russell, Brian, and I have been working with a few other folks from Red Hat on building out the bare metal provisioning story for OpenShift. And there were kind of two sides to this. One was to build out an upstream community, which originally was called Metal Cube. There was a conflict with another community project, so it ended up being renamed as Metal Cubed with a 3. So you'll notice that on the slides. And that's been going pretty well. We started this kind of early this year, and we've got things basically functional and working end to end. And within the upstream community, there has been interest from several other companies, and in particular within the Kubernetes community more broadly, some folks from the Airship community have been getting involved and are interested in reusing it for their bare metal provisioning. So I just thought, this is a good opportunity to give everyone a bit of a heads up. I know there's a few people on the call who are already aware of what we've been up to, but there's been quite a lot of progress over the last few months, and things are moving quickly. So hopefully this is just a chance to give everyone a quick update and answer any questions you may have. So yeah, the upstream pieces was really based around the cluster, the cluster and machine API integration. So this is obviously following the pattern that for the OpenShift 4 install story is much more based around using the Kubernetes native interfaces and resources to manage the cluster, both for the initial deployment and for the day 2 operations. So we looked at ways to align with that as closely as possible, but whilst also enabling automated management of bare metal. So obviously you do still have the option to have user-provided infrastructure, but this was much more around providing like a smooth on-ramp for people who just want to lay down an OpenShift environment on, say, a rack of nodes, and have a setup which works out of the box with a minimum amount of input from them. And so we basically created a new controller, which is called the bare metal operator. Maybe we should have called that bare metal controller. There's been some discussion about renaming that at some point. But basically this is an operator that knows how to walk a bare metal node through the steps of deployment. And it's got pluggable backends. At the moment, we're just targeting a single backend, which is using Ironic. That's actually a bare metal management project from OpenStack. We decided to reuse that primarily because it's got very good vendor support for the different hardware protocols, and things like virtual media support and Breadfish and IPMI, and we didn't want to have to reinvent all of those on day one. And it's also got a very diverse community behind it. So we've decided to reuse that for this, at least for this first iteration, and it's been working out pretty well. But we made a conscious decision at the outset to make that an internal implementation detail. So none of the Ironic kind of API details are exposed to the Kubernetes users, it's really just an under the hood choice that we made to bootstrap this effort. And then talking of the Kubernetes APIs involved, associated with the bare metal controller is a new custom resource definition, and that's a bare metal host. And this is basically just our representation of the physical nodes. So this is independent of the machines and the nodes within the cluster. From the the cluster view of the deployment, this is just the bare metal inventory, and here's where you would specify things like your your bare metal controller credentials and MAC addresses, the kinds of things you need in order to do automated deployment. And at the moment we're using Pixie Boot, but there's also work going on to allow virtual media support as well, which removes some of the L2 requirements. The other piece of this was the cluster API provider. So this is basically the machine API actuator, which knows how to match up the machines as specified in the machine set created at install time with the bare metal host objects. So that is basically the code we're using to do that. And so those are the two big pieces. There are also some other pieces, which are the container images to make all of this possible. So we've got some container images for all of the Ironic services. And also there's some development scripts. So metalcube-dev-env. If you want to just try out, kick the tires on a dev machine, this is quite a good way to do it. It's just some shell scripts in Ansible, which sets up some VMs and drives the bare metal operator pieces via Minikube. So that's a pretty quick way just to have a look and see how it all works. So just to kind of go over things in a bit more of a visual way, this is just showing kind of the architecture we've been going after. And as I mentioned, this is really trying to align very much with the way which the other platforms do for OpenShift 4. So we've got the bare metal operator, and within that same pod, there's actually a number of containers to enable the provisioning service, which is Ironic. But for simplicity, there's just one box on here. And then you have one or more bare metal host objects. And then associated with that, we create some data for the config drive, which is basically the ignition data used for that host, and then the credentials needed as well to control the bare metal controller. And so the Ironic layer knows how to do all of the provisioning, and so we can kind of use that as our black box that drives the provisioning of the nodes. It also has some other nice features that can do introspection of the nodes. So we can do better validation before actually deploying to the nodes, make sure the expected number of disks are there and that kind of thing. It can also do automated cleaning of all the disks on decommissioning of a node. So if you decide to recycle a node, that allows you to do it more safely. Primarily, that's kind of of interest in a multi-tenant environment. But yeah, there's a few nice features that we get for free by virtue of plugging that in. So this is kind of a visualization of the cluster API integration. This is going to be familiar to anyone who's worked on the other platforms. And yeah, so we've got the bare metal specific controller and the actuator, and everything else is basically driven via the normal machine API primitives. So if you want to add a new worker node, you just create a new bare metal host object. So you've got a spare host that can be matched, and then scale up your machine set. And that's basically the only difference from like cloud providers, is that you need to maintain your bare metal host objects because there's no API to generate those as you would have with AWS or one of the other cloud providers. So that's kind of the upstream metalcubed effort. It's all based around the cluster API side of things. And there's a few links here. I already mentioned the try it link. That kind of gives you the docs. And then there's all the various repos are under the metal3-io org on GitHub. We do also have a good amount of discussion on the upstream Slack channel, Cluster API Bare Metal, and there is an upstream Google group as well, Metal3 Dev. So yeah, feel free to come and reach out to us there if there are questions. And then the other side of this, which I was just going to quickly go through, is the OpenShift integration of this work. So alongside the upstream work to enable bare metal provisioning, there's also been an effort to make use of that work within the OpenShift builds. And so those of you working on the repos we've touched may well have noticed this over the last few months. We've landed a new bare metal platform, which is currently experimental in the OpenShift installer. That's basically functional. We have still got a few to-do items which we're in the process of iterating through, but the aim is to get that to the point where it's fully supportable, in the not too distant future. The other area which we made some changes was for this platform, the machine config operator now knows how to deploy a hosted load balancing solution. So obviously in the bare metal case, you haven't got load balancer as a service or anything like that. So that basically allows us to deploy HA proxy and keep lived in a configuration which allows us to load balance and fail over between the three master nodes for high availability. The other thing which we had to address was the lack of like a DNS as a service. And so for internal DNS resolution, we basically use MDNS and core DNS. And so that means that we only have a fairly small number of upstream DNS requirements, effectively just the virtual IPs that are managed by Keep Lived for API.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
On the API and ingress load balancing, did you guys look at Metal LB? Like, was that something that we looked at, but then just said it wasn't quite ready yet? What's the thinking around that project?
Yeah, so I remember we did have a look at that, and it didn't seem like something we could just drop in. I mean, effectively, what we've done, we had a number of folks working on this who have previously worked on kind of production OpenStack environments, and in that case, we used HA proxy and Keep Lived running in containers, and so we pretty much just replicated the same setup in this environment. There's no reason why we could certainly revisit that decision if there's something which is in the community we can switch to instead. It was really just we needed a load balancing and VIT management solution, and this seemed to be a quick way to achieve it.
Okay, yeah, and I'll say for like the benefit of folks on the call who may not we talked about this I think in a previous OKD, like over the long term we're trying to move OpenShift and OKD to be more self-managing, and one of the things that's been discussed is obviously having the control plane manage its own load balancers, because if we want to be able to replace machines on cloud, we would need to change the set of things that the the API server load balancer targets. And so one of the discussion points there was moving to service LBs, in which case, having an implementation that backs it. So it just sounds like something we'll have to keep in mind on the bare metal side as we move forward. Of those two arcs might need to tie up before they converge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, wherever possible, it would be nice to reuse implementation across multiple platforms. I mean, this actually is already being reused. The DNS and the load balancing pieces are being reused already for OpenStack and IPI bare metal. But yeah, as I said, if there's something which we can use which will be more applicable to other platforms, we can certainly have that discussion. I mean, we've tried to make it all fairly pluggable, and at the moment it's just we configure HA proxy and Keep Lived and the DNS services via the machine config operator. But yeah, certainly we could drop in something else if there's a good alternative.
Okay, thanks.
Stephen, can I buzz you with two questions, or maybe three? The first one, the easy one, is the on the cluster API, on the bare metal API, for the to access the credentials to access the bare metal, the IPMI or ILO or whatever. Is that does it follow the same pattern like in VMware provider, where you keep all the secrets into CM config map?
Yeah, so we basically create we create a secret and then reference that from the bare metal host object. I haven't actually looked at the VMware pattern, but that's probably something I can go away and take a look at. Certainly, I didn't implement that part, but I'm pretty sure the folks who did went and looked at the other platforms, and we tried to align where possible.
Super. And one more thing is like in the past I spoke with Russell and Doug. And I'm just trying to see whether the thought has changed recently. The ironic bit. Now, obviously, the ironic does a lot than just a Pixie and such like, which it's nice in one way because obviously, it controls the whole bare metal, but in some on the other side, it's not okay because maybe you're not getting the keys to the whole chassis. For example, if you have, I don't know, Cisco UCS and such like big farm. So my question is, is there any plan to kind of just do what CoreOS had with the Matchbox and everything, just a light, simple Pixie bootstrapping rather than Ironic, which does more than that?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I mean, the reason we didn't do that at the outset was, we were trying to get things done very quickly, and so we just wanted to drop in the provisioning component, which, several of us had already worked with Ironic quite extensively, so we were comfortable that it was, production ready. But that said, we were also very mindful that this kind of discussion was likely in the future, and so within the bare metal operator, we've been, quite careful not to expose any Ironic specific details, and so it should be possible to drop in an alternate implementation, which, as you say, could be like a, maybe a lightweight alternative just for kind of dev testing or something, or there have been discussions upstream about, various other alternate implementations. I mean, really, it came down to kind of the development effort required, and also kind of the overhead of maintaining multiple backends in the long term. But yeah, the idea was to make that possible in the future. None of the state is stored in Ironic; it's all stored in the the Kubernetes resources. And so basically, the idea is Ironic's supposed to be ephemeral. So it's different to kind of the OpenStack provider, where you're relying on state in the OpenStack APIs. In this case, we use the OpenStack APIs just as a temporary step in order to do the provisioning, and then ultimately the state is reflected by the Kubernetes resource, the bare metal host object. So cool. In theory, it would be possible to sort that out in the future, and it would be transparent to the users.
I see. So basically, in the new version of Ironic, put it this way, compared to the one in OpenStack, it doesn't have the dependencies with which had like Rabbit and maybe the database, the MySQL, and all this kind of stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're not using Rabbit. We're using JSON RPC. So that's
sure, okay.
We don't need a broker. We do still have a requirement on a database. It'd be nice to get rid of that, but again, it's ephemeral. We spin up MariaDB in the pod, but you can kill the pod and move it, and then we just recreate the data as needed. Okay,
perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, any other questions before I carry on? There's only like one more slide, so we'll have time for more questions at the end. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the machine config operator. There's also been a bunch of work going on in the machine API operator. Initially, we kind of stood up the bare metal operator manually just via some scripts in order to kind of do a prototype. Over the last 2 or 3 months, there's been a lot of effort going into trying to get those workarounds properly integrated, and so you can just use OpenShift install, and then all of the necessary pieces, including the bare metal operator and the Ironic services on the cluster, all get automatically configured. The other thing I didn't mention about the installer was that also uses Ironic to provision the 3 masters. So we have a special Terraform provider, and basically that's integrated inside the installer, such that on the Bootstrap VM, we start Ironic using the same containers that get started on the cluster. Eventually, it would be nice if we use the machine API operator in both places, but obviously with the current implementation, that's not possible. So it's just at the moment it's just a systemd service, but hopefully we'll switch that to using the machine config operator in the near future. There's actually an open issue for that. And so yeah, the only other sort of major gap which we're iterating on at the moment is some changes to the platform status API. We need to wire in a few values from the installer to a config map that the Ironic containers need. Currently, that's still created manually, and some folks on the team are working on getting changes into the machine API operator and also the OpenShift API schema to support that. So yeah, that's kind of the current status. It is functional. We've been evaluating this on VMs and on bare metal, and just trying to kind of work on additional production requirements, such as looking into how to enable single stack IPv6 and larger scale deployments, that kind of thing. But yeah, certainly it's at the point where if you're interested, evaluation is possible. And with that in mind, there is also another set of scripts similar to the ones for the upstream repos, where basically we have got some scripts that will set up a VM-based test environment on a bare metal box with a reasonable amount of RAM. This will set up a number of VMs for you, which are basically dummy bare metal, and then we actually have some services running in containers that connect as either a dummy BMC for IPMI, or also there's dummy Redfish support there as well. So yeah, this is a quick way to get a test environment running end to end. You also have the option of deploying on bare metal using OpenShift install directly, which is the ultimate goal here. To allow people to just run OpenShift install exactly as you would for any other platform, and you just input your host details and then it deploys. We're pretty close to that being possible now. There's just a couple of workarounds still in the scripts that, as I described above, things like the configuration resource or the machine aid for the bare metal operator and a few other bits in the installer. But yeah, that's basically the current status. If you'd like to find out more, there's a few more links there. So it's a bit hard to read. But yeah, there are some docs in the installer. That's a good entry point. And then if you go and look at the, there's OpenShift forks for the bare metal operator and the actuator, and the same for the ironic images. Many of these are reflected from the Metal Cubed upstream repos. So yeah, that was all I had really, and just a bit of a heads up. But I'm happy to answer any more questions now, or feel free to track me down on Slack as well.
I have one more question, if you don't mind, Stephen.
Sure.
Has the I think it was a discussion which I lost track. Has the option to treat the masters as nodes been implemented, or is that still to be discussed and approved by the architects? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that has been implemented. I can't remember exactly what the interface ended up looking like, but yeah, we no longer have that workaround in the dev scripts. So the part of the context of that, which might be useful to share, is originally we were kind of going after kind of a hyper-converged deployment where you would potentially have quite a small hardware footprint. More recently, we've also been looking at how we would enable potentially much larger scale deployments where, perhaps having schedulable master nodes would be of less importance. But yeah, the idea was to support both the kind of opinionated appliance kind of deployment and also, in the future, potentially larger scale environments, perhaps for, telco usage and that kind of thing. And obviously that's one of the targets that the Airship team have been interested in as well.
Yeah, would you mind sharing these slides? I'd love to explore some of these links.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'll link them into the meeting minutes as soon as I stop talking. Yeah, no problem.
Excellent.
All right.
And the OS that it lays down on the metal, is it still dependent on Red Hat Core OS, or is it using more of a base CentOS 7 or CentOS 8 image?
No, it's all using the Red Hat Core OS at the moment, and obviously as we've been discussing the OKD4 roadmap, and certainly it would be great to validate that with the community builds as they become available. At the moment, the only non-RCOS bit is the RAM disk we use for the deployment, but ironic, that's still either CentOS for upstream or RHEL based in the downstream builds. In the future, it might be interesting to explore using more of a kind of an RCOS RAM disk approach there, but again, we kind of had a RAM disk we could just reuse. So for now, we're using a non-RCOS based image there.
Okay. Yeah, I want to try this out on a couple of my little Intel NUCs. They don't support IPMI directly, but with the virtualization strategies you've got with libvirt and the BMC emulator, that should work.
So I heard you mention something about Airship. I thought Airship is Airship going to be part of the bigger story with the Metal 3 stuff, or
well,
what?
only in as much as they're interested in the bare metal provisioning side of it and using the same interfaces. So, that's really part of the upstream community discussion, and that's kind of independent of the OpenShift integration that's been going on. But it's the aim was with the Metal Cube community was to try and get the broader Kubernetes community involved and interested. And over the last few months, we've been seeing a few other companies getting involved and committing folks to work on it. So some of the folks on that team have been interested in reusing the Metal Cubed work for Airship. But as I say, that's kind of just for the upstream Metal Cubes community side of things.
So no big, master plan of OpenStack on OpenShift kind of thing?
No, I mean, in this case, we're just using one OpenStack component, which is, the ironic provisioning API. And as I mentioned earlier on, really a kind of design goal of this whole process was to keep that an internal implementation detail and use it as a black box that is just under the hood for the bare metal operator. It's certainly not kind of an OpenStack tenant-facing API that we would be exposing in this case.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, as an observer, it almost feels like these ecosystems at some point are going to morph and merge, because Kubernetes is becoming more and more what OpenStack does. I don't know if you guys have any insight into where this may end up going in the next couple of years, but it does feel like we're really crossing over now. We're both the superset of capabilities between the two of them is being more and more absorbed by what Kubernetes does.
I'm not sure that's a good thing, but yeah, I'm observing the same thing. Like I'm actually slightly worried because as we bound out past containers and things like that, and we start dealing with bare metal and virtual machines and all kinds of weird scheduling and telco grade and all the, as many buzzwords as I can throw at it, it's like that's going to make this obnoxiously more difficult than it was before. I mean, as it was, until very recently, setting up a Kubernetes thing, like a very basic one, wasn't that difficult, but now it's turning into a smorgasbord of mess. And like you can kind of see it with how OpenShift has evolved into like such a messy project that nobody can actually build anything unless they have some, internal scepter of knowledge.
Yeah, which hopefully will get cleared up with updated documentation.
Here's to hoping.
And in the future, we'll be working on cutting down the components that have to go into an OKD install, at least. So maybe we'll create profiles or we'll make it configurable in a way so you don't have to install everything. So that we're gonna get that in OKD first and then see how that can trickle down into OCP later on. But that's definitely a thing that we want to look at later on once we have the stable OKD on FCOS release.
Sure, makes sense.
All right, then, if you can throw the link to this slide deck into the notes, that would be great, Steve. We're getting close to the end of the hour. I just wanted to make a note that if we do keep to the 2 weeks cadence that we are trying really hard to keep to, the next meeting would be on November 12th. And I think daylight saving time hits us up then, so I'll send a notice out to the meeting group. We did have one more thing on the agenda that we were trying to sneak in. I'm not sure if we have enough time, Dusty, or if you want to table the packet conversation until the next meeting.
Yeah, I don't think we had a lot to add from that conversation this week. Okay. We were hoping to get Tomasz. He might have a lot of input, or he might have, just a small update. But we'll try to have that next time, I guess.
Okay, cool. All right then. I'll just go sort of around the chair room here. Christian, do you have anything else to add to today's meeting to bring up?
Just shortly to the packet thing. So that would be very helpful for us. I don't know whether it's planned to support our use case in Packet at the moment, which would be building or taking the sources and building them directly in Fedora Koji instance automatically. It's a CI system that would really help us with getting stuff built in a Fedora environment and not relying on Pro for that. But yeah, I don't know what the plan is there, the timeline for any of that. Just to add, that would be really helpful for us. Yeah, getting Tomasz into this conversation is probably the thing. And yeah, that's it for me.
I did create an issue on OpenShift community with tagging Tomasz in there. He hasn't responded, but at least it's tracked there. So
Okay.
if you want to, Diane, if you want to follow up on that and like do some internal poking to see if you can get his schedule to show up on the next meeting, that'd be great.
And the code ready containers OKD stuff is that still, I'm sure it's still all relevant, but did we have a person associated with that? Let me just look at this.
Hey, Diane, this is Charo. You had tagged me on that, but you may have tagged me on that thinking that I was actively part of that project.
Yeah.
I had put some notes out for everyone else because I've been consuming that project using the single node cluster to build the bundle that gets consumed by code ready containers. So I could talk to my experience there with it and some of the gaps that I see as it being ready for consumption by OKD, but I'm not an active member of that project.
See if I can, or if anyone can nominate someone from that group for me to track down for the next call, or the call after that. That would be great. So I think for me, the open issue that I'd like to see talked about on the Google group is, Christian, once we have the alpha, how you want to manage the feedback on that. So maybe we could discuss that on the mailing list or through Slack or something and come up with a good proposal so that when we hand it off week's time, hopefully, and show it off, we have a way for people to give feedback or put an issue against it so that we can address them. That would be helpful.
And it'd be good to have that all ready by the time we write the blog posts.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I will send a note to the mailing list and ask you all to let me know if you're coming to KubeCon. Because if I host in office hours, I need more than just myself there. I can open the door and sit there and take notes and try and deploy it. I cannot fully technically help anyone walk through this stuff. So, but I will definitely deploy it. So that'll be fun. But I'd like to do something hands-on-ish at KubeCon to draw in a few more people from the external world to give us feedback on this, as well as other Red Hatters.
Where is KubeCon and when is it?
It's in San Diego. The gathering is on day 0. The OpenShift gathering that I host is November 18th, and then KubeCon kicks off in earnest on the 19th, 20th, and 21st. And in November. So it's San Diego, and if you haven't booked a hotel, you're screwed.
Yeah,
basically.
I definitely.
I'm not coming.
Yeah, basically, I have a cot that I can roll out. But yeah, you're. It's pretty crazy. But there's a lot of stuff that's going on too, and I want to really use, if we can get that Fedora magazine and a blog post out. I'd love to be able to socialize all of this to get more, external voices and make sure we have adequate feedback and stock a few more external resources to work on this with y'all.
Maybe next year. This year it was too crazy.
Yeah, that's all right. So, and definitely we should submit something for DevConf. So Christian, maybe what we'll do is we'll take the thing that you put into Red Hat Summit and just submit it for DevConf, and also ask for an OKD Working Group meeting space there. That happened.
Great idea. Yeah, I'll do that. I was going to put essentially the same proposal.
Okay. Yeah. If you can do that, and then reach out and CC me if you need me to nudge them. I'm sure they'll give us a space. Just everybody bring your snow jacket and your snow boots. And that's all I have for today. So the next meeting will be at the same UTC's time. I'm pretty sure the time zones change, but we'll still keep it at the same one, and I'll adjust the schedules. So that's all we have for today. I want to just kind of respect everybody's time and make sure we let you all back into your meetings that I'm sure you have right now, or to go code something wonderful.
Or a little bit of both.
Mostly
Multitasking, that's what we all do best. So
Eating during boring meetings.
this wasn't boring, was it? This was exciting.
No, this one was good.
All right, take care. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for joining.
Cheers.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, all. Take care. Thanks, Clayton, for coming. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks all.